and level off the aircraft before it impacts the ground. Although receiving a GPWS alert requires immediate execution of an escape maneuver in most instances, prompting an application of maximum power and the best rate of climb, an exemption in the Southwest Airlines company manuals allows a flight crew to continue an approach even after receiving a GPWS warning. But this is only allowed under the condition that the flight is conducted in visual meteorological conditions. Additionally, the crew must ensure that there is no risk of collision with the ground.
Pull up.
Hearing another "pull up" warning, the captain states, "It's all right," to the first officer and continues the approach. He instructs the first officer to extend the flaps to 30 degrees and, a few moments later, to the full 40-degree position. As the first officer points to the airspeed indicator, the captain states, "It won't go, I know that. It's all right," referring to the flap limiter, a design feature of the 737 model. To avoid excessive loads on the flaps, the flap limiter restricts the movement of the flaps beyond the 30-degree position at airspeeds above 158 knots. As a result, even though the flap selector is in the fully extended position, the aircraft is not in the full landing configuration. However, the approach is continued and the decision is made to attempt a landing. On the ground, several airport employees notice an aircraft that is approaching the runway unusually fast. Indeed, as Flight 1455 reaches the threshold of runway 08, it is still traveling 50 knots over its target approach speed. At 170 feet over the runway, the captain begins to raise the nose of the aircraft to transition it into a flare. Although the speed starts to slowly decrease, the 737 continues to float over the runway for 9 more seconds. At 6:10, at an airspeed of 180 knots and with flaps still extended only to 30 degrees, the aircraft at last touches down on runway 08, some 2,000 feet from the runway threshold. The flight crew now has just under 4,000 feet of runway length available to slow down. A loud roar erupts across the airport as the engines are set to the maximum reverse setting, and once the speed drops to 158 knots, the flaps finally extend to 40 degrees. Too little too late, as they have little effect on the aircraft's ability to slow down on the runway. "My fault," the captain repeats out loud several times, watching the airport fence move toward him faster than he expected. Reaching the last 1,000 feet of the runway, the first officer joins the captain in applying maximum pressure to the brake pedals, but nothing works. As a last resort, the captain turns the nose wheel tiller all the way to the right, hoping that the aircraft starts turning toward the gates and stops on the ramp. Unable to turn off the runway, the aircraft only slightly veers to the right. It then slides off the runway, breaks through the airport fence, and hits a passing car, pinning its hood to the ground. The airliner finally comes to a stop, only several feet from a gas station. Had it been a few knots faster on the approach, the outcome would have been much more terrifying. Despite the sheer terror she has just experienced, the driver of the pinned vehicle and her 4-year-old child are uninjured. Inside the aircraft, shock and panic ensued. The force of the impact deployed an escape slide at the front of the aircraft, blocking the forward section emergency exits. The forward jump seat, occupied by 2 flight attendants, has collapsed. With no word from the flight crew just yet, it is hard to know if it is safe to evacuate the aircraft, and the flight attendants stand by before opening the doors. It appears that the worst possible outcome has been avoided, and there are no fatalities on board. Finally, the captain turns on the passenger announcement system and addresses the passengers.
"Folks, please remain seated. We are all right."
Well, there goes my career.
What went wrong with Flight 1455, and what could have been done to avoid the accident? A review of all factors and accident data, completed by the National Transportation Safety Board, has determined the main probable cause of the accident to be the flight crew's actions that lead to a high-speed approach at a steep angle, and their decision to continue the approach even though the company defined parameters for a stabilized approach were not met. Although most of the blame for this accident was attributed to the flight crew, the NTSB identified as a contributing factor the actions of the controller that placed the aircraft in such a manner as to leave no safe options for the flight crew other than a go-around maneuver. There is a silver lining to this story. As a result of this accident, runway 08 at Burbank Airport was eventually retrofitted with an engineered materials arresting system, a soft cushion-like material installed at the end of the runway that easily crumbles under an aircraft, slowing it down without causing significant damage. 18 years after the accident, the EMAS at Burbank Airport stopped another Southwest Airlines 737 that overran runway 08 on landing. But that is a story for another day.